and welcome to VFX with Natron. Today's topic is gonna be creating a chiseled font. Okay? So with nothing else, let's get started. Alright. Let me just make sure I've got all my information up here. Alright. We're going to start with a text node. So, and we're going to go and we're going to pick out a nice font. Today's font is going to be, let's see. Let's make that a little more readable. There we go. Alright, today's font is going to be brought to you in part by Deja Vu Serif, which will be a nice font to turn into a chiseled font. Alright. Also, I think the bottom of my screen, I'm just noticing, is not quite set up right. Whoa. That's not what we're supposed to have. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. Just give me a moment. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're first going to set this to center interact. We're going to scale our font up to 100. I should get it to a decent size. And we're going to enter something nice like, Natron. Oops. We need to... And it helps if I actually type it correctly. Natron. Whoops. Natron. Alright. In fact, let's make it capital. Boy. Alright, there we go. So, as we know, one of the first things we want to do is we want to split our view so that we can see a waveform of what happened or what's going on. So I'm going to create a new viewer over here. I'm going to hit the period key to create an extra dot node that links up both viewers. And over here, I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to drag out a new link point. And I'm going to put a waveform in here. And below my waveform, I'm going to put a multiply. And we're going to crank that up a bit. In fact, we're going to crank up a lot. And we're going to take our waveform, set our display gamma to 1, and we'll drop our acceleration down to 2 so we can see more detail. Alright, that should be plenty. So, first thing that everybody... Alright, hold on one second. I'm going to switch back so that... Oops. That I'm on. So the first thing that most people think they're going to want to do is put a croc extrude, or not extrude, excuse me, a croc emboss. Why? Because all a chiseled font is a type of embossment. So our first instinct is, of course, to put an embossment down. So let's add an emboss. Hit tab, type in emboss. You get Croc Emboss, which is a community plugin, by the way. You can download that. And we see our embossment. Let's make that a little bit bigger so we can see it. Well, that's not a very impressive looking chisel. I mean, we're kind of chiseled. It's there, but it's not overly impressive. All right. Let's bring that down. I hit space, by the way, to enlarge that. Space over that window, enlarged it. Space over that window again, shrank it back down. Okay, so what can we do? Alright, well, probably the first thing that goes through your mind is, okay, let's take our height up. And by the way, you might notice that our view height defaulted to 0 this time. That's because I updated my plugins directory. It turned out that that was off. I'll go into that a little bit later after this is over, about what happened and why I was getting a different readout last time than this time. All right. So we take our view height and we crank it up, and we see stuff happening over in our waveform, but not a lot is actually happening over here to our actual font. Well, that didn't help much, so let's reset it. So we right-click, reset height to default. Let's take our light height up. Crank our light height up, and oh, now we're seeing something that we saw last time. We get this little streak, and our text is becoming a little more gray at the top. And in fact, if we keep taking it up a lot, we can make it so it's white up at the top, but that's not really what we want, and we're getting this unwanted artifact, which we happen to know is tied to our view height. So if we take our view height down to -1, that gets rid of that glowy bit off to the side, and we wind up with something, but it still doesn't look like a chiseled font. It's not very useful. So let's reset that to our default. And let's go back to our text for a second and just examine one letter. We're going to go to the letter I, and I'm going to use a capital I. Whoops. And when we update that, we're going to also make it a different font temporarily. We're going to switch it from Deja Vu Serif to Deja Vu Sans, which is a sans serif font. And we're going to put a croc emboss off to the side for a moment and just look at the font itself. Of course, my font, I have parameters, or I have an interaction with it going over my thing. I'm going to just disable that by right-clicking on my view and just show hide overlays. That will disable it so we can see a pure view of my font. And I want to do the same thing over here in my waveform. I'm going to show hide overlays, and we can see this a little bit better. The other thing I'm going to do for the time being is bring up our font size a bit more so we can actually see our interactions with this. So obviously we can tell here that it's just kind of dropping down. There's nothing happening, and croc emboss works off of a gradient. It's going to look for a gradient to create that 3D effect. So it's going basically from white, which is up here, to black, which is down here. Down here. Okay, so white, black, and it just has a cliff, and it goes straight down. And so we're not getting much of a fall off. It does do a wee bit at the very edge. It says, oh, we have white, and then we have black. Done. And so what we wind up with is basically just a white edge and black on the other side, which is falling into the shadow. All right. So to improve this, what we're going to do is obviously pop on something that blurs it. So the most obvious thing is blur. When we add a blur, the blur does nothing at first because, well, the blur has no size. So let's increase our size. We up it a little bit, and it doesn't do much, we're starting to see the blur. In fact, I'm going to set the blur to 25, which is a good start for a blur. And we can see on our waveform, if we zoom in, we're going to zoom in on our waveform down here at this edge. It's coming down and it's falling off, and it's going to gradiate out into the blackness. It's not really, it's soft. It's not very useful there. But up at the top, we've got something, and it's rounding off at the top. This isn't bad. This might produce a decent font. We'll have to just take a look. So let's see how that's interacting. Fortunately, because we had our text node and our croc emboss was attached to our text node, when we inserted our blur node, it connected also to our croc emboss. So now the blur node is feeding our croc emboss, but our font, let's make sure our font is the right size. Our font is, it's big enough so that we can start seeing what's going on. So let's connect our output from our blur node to our Croc Emboss. And when we do that, we actually start seeing something that actually looks kind of like, that looks actually a lot more like an embossed font. In fact, it looks a heck of a lot more like an embossed font. We're getting a bit of a grade going off one side and a bit of a grade going off the other side. And down towards this corner, we're getting a bit of a grade. We could say probably by taking up the, let's reset this view. I'm going to show our overlays again because we only have one node selected in our properties, and the overlay that we were experiencing that was giving me an issue was from our text node right here. This is from the text node. It's so I can move the font around. But when I go back to my Croc Emboss, it disappears. So we're good to go here. So we're seeing it's gradiating off here, but it's really soft at the edge. Now, all right, let's play with things. We're gonna double click on our blur, and we're going to increase the radius of this a bit more. See if that does anything. That really doesn't change anything. It makes it softer. As we can see, it drops our white point down a lot, which is not really what we want to do. So we'll put it back to 25. Gives us a nice high font or high white point on our font. If we drop it lower, we start having weird interactions over here. What we see is that the top starts to become flatter, but we wind up with a little bit of a gray, and it doesn't look very good there. So let's bring this back up to 25. Whoops, 25. So this isn't giving us really what we want at this point. And we're actually going to go about turning this into an embossed font. We actually have something right now that actually will work, but we need to do something to it. What we need to do is we need to merge it with the original text node as a mask. And that will change this a little bit, okay? So the way we're going to do that, we're going to put a merge node here. Now, if you might remember from the I don't remember if it was from the last lesson or this lesson, we noticed, I told you guys that if we put the B in here and we go to our alpha channel, we'll notice that our alpha channel is this soft letter. It looks just like our blur node. If we connect directly up, I'm pulling my viewer off so that you can see. I just hit the one key and connected to my blur node. Okay. If I look at the output of my merge node and look at the output of my blur node, right now they're the exact same. And the reason they're the exact same is because the emboss node is not actually altering the alpha channel of the blur node. So if we turn off our alpha channel, this is our color channel, but our alpha channel is still blurred. What we want to do is take our alpha channel from our text node, which is nice and sharp. Let's double check it. See, we go to the alpha, it's nice and sharp. It represents the text node. We want to use that to define the shape, okay? So we go back down to our merge node, and we're going to pump our alpha or our mask into this. So I'm going to move my text node over, take the mask, and I'm going to connect it directly up to it. But nothing has happened. Our mask has remained exactly as it was. Nothing has changed. And that has to do with the fact that our background, our blur node is coming in through our Croc node as the background to the merge node. So we want to disconnect that and leave that disconnected, and then connect the foreground or the above node to our Croc Emboss. And lo and behold, we wind up with a chiseled font, or at least the starts of a chiseled font. Okay. So if we go back to our viewer, connect it up to this dot. All right. And I'm going to organize this a little bit. The way I'm going to organize this, I don't want the mask node or the connection to the mask and the source node overlapping each other when I put the text node above. So I'm going to pull it off to the side. I'm going to hold down the control node, or excuse me, the control key. And on the mask, I'm going to pull down a point and leave it off to the side. And I'm going to pull a second point and put it there for the moment, and then just organize this by putting it up like this. Okay, so we have this, the text node has an output that comes out here, goes down, and connects into the mask of the merge node. Okay. Now, what does that has left us with this lovely eye. Let's fit this. We've zoomed in a little bit. This eye, but it's not overly impressive at this point. We have a sharp, if we look at it, let's look at the, before the merge node, we wound up with an eye that has sort of a soft edge. When we go down and we can check out the output of the merge node after we've made it merge to the above with the background empty, we wind up with this eye that looks like this. However, this still doesn't look quite right, and it may not be obvious at this point. Let's go back down here. Let's try and put this over something else. For this, we're going to put a background in. All right, I'm going to move our waveform off to the side. And I'm going to add let's add a nice background, a community plugin. We're going to go to community plugin. I'm actually going to right click over here because my picture's up on the screen. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to community plugins, GLSL. I'm going to go to source, and I'm going to go to rolling fire. All right. And it put it right on top of our merge node, which is not where we wanted it. And rolling fire is this pretty rolling fire. So we're going to, and if we hit play on the rolling fire, you'll notice, by the way, we don't have the rolling fire going into our waveform. That's why it's not updating over here. But we can see what it's doing over here in our viewer node. It looks pretty good. Let's go back to the start of that. And we're going to merge our embossed font on top of this. All right. How are we going to do that? We're going to add a merge node. Right now, to our rolling fire. We have the rolling fire going into this merge node as the background. We're going to connect the above, to our text, and that's going to put the text on top of it. And something weird. It doesn't look like it's doing anything. Why not? We have the above here. Whoops, excuse me. I just connected it. I select this point. I hit 1. I'm connected here. The viewer is going out. We have it. I go over this. I hit, there we go. All right, it should, except for it looks a little funny. Everybody else notice that it's looking a little funny? What we're starting to see here is that it's really soft right here. It's not looking like our background. Well, the reason that it's not looking like our background is because if we check our actual alpha channel back here, we'll notice that it isn't a pure cutout of our alpha channel or of our text node, excuse me. So, well, what do we do? How come we're not getting a pure alpha channel of that? If we look at our alpha, here's our alpha of our text, and it's white, but down here, it's soft. It's a little black on the edge, which means it's transparent. And the reason is we're actually cropping around our blur node. And by cropping around our blur node, we're getting a little bit, anything that's from the blur node that is inside of this box that's still blurred gets cropped in or gets left in. And that, we're actually going to take advantage of that. We're going to actually, what we're going to do is we're going to turn this, let's turn off our alpha channel by hitting A up here. So we're back to RGB from alpha. Again, up here, it says alpha, we hit A, and we go back to RGB. And this is what our RGB looks like. What we're going to do is we're going to actually feed our background of this merge node into the text output and merge it over it. And what that's done is it's taken the black from this, which is, and used the alpha channel, which is this, and merged it on top of our text node, which is this, which results in this. Okay, again, the emboss comes out, it has black with the blurred, it has blurred background, so it's a little bit black, and then we're superimposing it over it, and that makes it, it gives us this nice rear edge, which makes it look actually a lot more interesting. Now, I could make it just solid black, but it actually would make the font a lot less appealing in a lot of ways. It would make it black. We could do that by simply, I don't know, we can take anything like a solid color. We could literally put a solid color over here. Let's put a solid in here. And if I put a solid in here and I pipe the background in as a solid, then when we come back here, well, that didn't do what we wanted. That actually did the opposite. It's clipping it here. Why is that? Well, it actually has to do with the mask. Our mask is, what we're doing is the above is coming in with a mask. If I take it out, oh, that's no good. We'd have to mask it with this. Uh-oh. I'm actually not getting what I wanted. Well, we're not going to worry about it. That is very weird. Oh, wait. Duh. Of course. That's what I wanted. Oh! I used a solid. I didn't use a constant. Faux pas on my behalf. Because the solid doesn't have a alpha channel, I would have needed to use a constant because I was trying to write the constant in. I should always use constant. There's a reason I don't. I come from a background where at times in the past, you wanted to keep everything to as few parameters as possible because it kept your memory footprint low. Nowadays, that's less of a problem, of course. So solids don't have background or don't have alpha channels, but constants do. Again, so I've created a constant. I put the constant up to, whoops. I want to put the alpha of the constant up to 1, not 2. Let's take the background, put it in here. Whoops. Put that background to the merge in here. And now we have an alpha, but we don't have our trim, which comes from the mask here, which we trim out, and there we go. Boring. All that for boringness. It doesn't look as good as it did when we had it with it just going over to our original. I like the white better myself. It makes the text look a lot more interesting, a lot more creative, and so forth. But it does create a problem here where our or it can create a haloing on the edge here if you're not careful with certain types of fonts. So we're going to get rid of that. This basically is all we need to create our chiseled font. So let's go back and change our font text so that it looks more interesting. Let's put it back to Natron. we're going to do it in caps. And our font is too big because I increased it. So we're going to set that back down to 100. Or nope, 200. There we go. And this is also going to bring up another point, which is the size or how much we blur or apply our croc emboss is going to change based off of how big our font size is. So you'll notice as I zoom in, the center point here looks a lot softer. So I need to alter my settings for my croc emboss to make it look better, to make the font look better at this bigger size. But there are ways around this. We're not going to need to worry about this too much after we animate, or when we go to animate it, because we're not actually going to animate this font itself. We're going to animate using the result of this. So what I want to do, what I set this up to do, is I set it up so that this would animate at a text size, with a text size of 200, I think it was. Yep, 300. All right, 300 will work. I might change this a little bit. Let's see. Let's go back over here for a second and look at our font for a few. And I want to see my waveform. And am I okay with this? I'm mostly okay with this. There's one other thing I think I want to do to this. I think this would actually look a little bit better with a little more anti-aliasing on the center edge. So I'm going to just add an LS FXAA, whoops, and I added it at the wrong point, which is causing us a problem. Let's connect that back up, pull these back up, and we're not going to worry about our graph being overly clean at this point. So let's look at what that did here. We're going to go up to the R in the Natron here. Around this edge here, we can see when we switch to this, it softens it up just a little bit, makes it look a little bit nicer in my opinion. So I'm going to go with it. I like it like that. That's what I did on my demo. So, all right, let's hook it back up here to the fire, and what the? Something went weird. Huh. Okay, why does it look weird? Well, because if I go back and I look at my alpha channel, the the LSFXAA has changed my alpha channel. So I'm going to need to merge this, so I'm going to use a shuffle node here. Not there. I want to do it, well, oh, what the heck. We're going to put it, I don't want this to go any further down. So we're going to hit here. We're going to add a shuffle node here. Shuffle. And what I'm going to do is take my original mask here, pipe it into my A on the shuffle node, and then we're still looking at the alpha here, seeing the screwed up alpha. I'm going to take my alpha from the A, which is this, and I'm going to put it over, replace the alpha of the output of the FXAA, and I'm going to tell it, so I want A to take the alpha of A, and that has replaced it. So now my alpha channel is back to what it was. And now when I go to my output and I hit A, we have our Natron with the new FXAA applied to it. This is useful if you're using, again, I recommend this. This is the reason I put the FX8 here is because I knew it was going to cause a small problem there. And I wanted to show this because there will be other fonts where you may want to use this as a solution to give it a nicer looking. It will smooth out your the edge of your chiseled font. Okay. Now, this is also not the right font. We switched it back to Deja Vu Sans. We wanted it to be Deja Vu Serif, because serif fonts almost always look better with in chiseled form. They have more angles, and the angles make it, you know, prettier looking. All right, so we have a chiseled font. Now the question becomes, how do we're at the point where we get into talking about animation. I'm actually, at this point, not interested in keeping up our waveform anymore. We've used our waveform to get our chiseled font. We've seen what we wanted to see there. I have a viewer node that I don't need, and we're going to get rid of that. All right, so we're at the animation point. Just so we know that this is a right. Just so we know that this is a chiseled font, we may want to put up a background on this. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to go into my other, and I'm going to put backdrop. And this is a good way to organize things. You put it up here, and you drag down around it, and we can rename our backdrop so that it is, we're just going to call it, now, we're actually renaming the node. You could type on the node text label, but, well, what the heck, we'll call it here. We're just going to call it Chiseled Font. All right. And that helps if I look at what I'm typing. Chiseled Font. There we go. And it puts Chiseled Font down here. We could change it if we want. We could change that there and put it up here and put a 1 after it, because this is a node name, not a label for it. So just know that you should always put a 1 or an increment number after it if you want to have your node name be the name of your area. All right, so we've organized this, we've gotten it, we know that's a chiseled font. We're running past the 1 hour mark, or excuse me, the half-hour mark, so I'm going to quickly add in some animation onto this. We're actually going to do the fire in a second part. I'm actually going to do that after this because there's some tricks to it. I know I said that we were going to blur the background. I'm going to make this a two-parter. So this is part 1. First, let's talk about animation. Now, the first thing that most people would think is, at this point, we would want to transform it. So I'm going to hit T, put a transform, and the obvious thing is to scale it. So we'll scale it to 0. And that scales it to nothingness. So it's way off in the distance. And then we're going to... we're operating at 24 frames a second. So for our animation, what I want to do for our animation is go out 3 seconds approximately. So I'm going to put 24 into this. Now this is a increment. This moves in an increment of whatever you type in. So if 24 frames per second means if I move in increments of 24, I should move and 24 frame or 1 second with every click of this button to the right. So I hit this 1. How long do I want it to sit there? I want us to see the flames for a couple seconds so people can process it. And then I want it to come out at about the 3 second mark. So I'm going to go 3 seconds in. And then I'm going to set this back and set our scale to 1. Well, except for one problem here. I didn't actually key it. So we're going to go back. That's all right. We can set our key here, all dimensions, and we set this to 1, and we go back to the beginning of our animation, and we set it to 0. And now let's play this through. Let's turn off our overlays so that we can see it, because we have the transformation node and we don't want that showing its little dialogue when we're previewing it. Let's hit play, and it goes, and it comes in, and oh, we didn't do... All right, well, no, we're going to let this play out because there's going to be a couple problems. I'm doing this wrong. I'm informing people I'm doing this wrong. That's good enough. We've seen enough. We have our animation. We say, oh, watch it. And as it slows down. It doesn't look right. It's not coming in with a lot of impact. And that's because straight transform is actually the wrong type of node for this, for animating this. Some of you may be saying, oh, but we're not easing it. It's actually not the ease. We'll go over to our curve editor. We'll take this. We'll select both of these. And you can see there's actually two values. There's an X and Y. We're doing a uniform scale. If I select both of them, I drag around both of them. By the way, this means I have both of them selected as opposed to one. This would be, right now I have this X selected. Now I have the Y. Click in this, both. I select the both dots by dragging around it. Right click. I hit interpolation, horizontal interpolation, and I wind up looking at converting both so that they ease, and we'll go back just to prove that this is not actually looking any better. It eases in, it slows down, but it actually makes this look worse. We're still not looking like we're punching in. It's not flying in really quick. It's coming in and it's slowing down, and the reason is because when you're dealing with scale, it's not actually truly transforming in 3D space. Something that comes from a distance away from you, when it comes zooming in, as it gets closer to you, it actually gets faster and faster the closer it gets to you. So we will want this to actually work in an exponential way as it gets closer. And we could do this with scale, but it would be a pain in the rump, because if we look at the scale, we have to deal with two of these things. And I could just say, okay, well, I want the X to kind of go like that, and then I want it to be, oh, well, I need to add in a point over here and sort of do this, and oh, now I got to do the same thing for my other channel, and I'm going to be manipulating this, and this would be just a royal pain in the butt. Not worth doing. Avoid it at all costs. So get rid of this transform node. We don't want it at all. We're going to go back to the beginning. The proper node for this is a card 3D. So if we type in this, I think it's called, it's called card 3D. And we see down here, it's a transform node. And card 3D is a lot like a 2D transform, except for it works. It gives us the additional ability. We actually have a lot of additional abilities in here, but the only thing we're worried about at this point in time is the generalized translate. We're not going to worry about our camera. We're going to leave it at its default, and you'll notice that it didn't move anything, and that's because with a Z depth of -1, we wind up at the exact same position we wound up by default. Okay, if we zero our Z depth out, by the way, to 0, it disappears, and you might think to yourself it went zipping off into the distance, but it didn't. It actually moved up. It's now existing behind, or it's actually behind our what's called the clipping plane, which is at our camera. It's moved in front of the camera, or behind us slightly. And if we can figure this out by bringing our Z depth back a little bit, and as we pull it back, we can see we're zooming in, and it's gone past, and it's negative. As it moves in a positive direction, it gets closer to us. So let's reset this to its default, and let's hit our advanced frame 3 times so that we're back up to frame 73. We're going to put a key here on at 1. We want to keep it at 1 when we get to a Z depth of our final position, which is where the font is. This is where we're going to end. If it came past us, we would want to scale our font up to bigger than our screen, potentially. We're actually going to cheat a little bit in a while, and that will get to our last bit, which is that will actually be covered in the next tutorial, or the next bit, which is, as I said, this is two-parter. All right, so back at 0, we're just going to set this to 0, and that creates a keyframe automatically. Now, when we hit play, whoops, I did the wrong thing. I didn't want to do 0. I just got done saying this. I'm an idiot. I want this to be actually like negative 1,000. 1,000. Bam. All right. Now, when we hit play, what we're going to wind up with is something that all of a sudden it looks like it just came in there. It just appeared out of nowhere. Well, it actually didn't. We can actually see it, but it happens so quickly that perhaps negative 1,000 was not quite where we want it to be. All right, the reason is that's too much. We want to zoom in on this. All right, we're going to go over our viewer. We're going to hit, with it centered, we're going to hit Control and the 1 key. And this is going to zoom our view until we're looking at this at a 1:1, 100%. That's the same as coming up here, clicking on our zoom aspect ratio, and hitting 100%. But we're looking at the center. We're back at frame 0. What I want to do is transform this, look at our transform, and bring this forward until we just start to see it. Aha! I just see it. I barely see it. I don't know if you can. It's at like 200. So I want to take this back to 300, where it's there, but it's so small, most people are never going to see this. All right, and I'm going to hit F to fit the screen. Or that's whoops, that's our zoom fit. Okay, so we're at 300 here. Now let's hit play, and we get just a smidge hint of it coming in, and kapow, it's right there. That's how actual depth zoom works. But we want to emphasize this even more, and the way we're going to emphasize it more is we're going to turn on motion blur. And this is going to slow everything down a lot, and it's going to create a problem with our fire, which is if we actually were to render this out, I'm going to put this up to 1, and we're going to go to frame, we're going to go ahead a couple frames here so that we can look at this closer. And whoops, it's 73. There's one other thing we want to do, which is we want to go to our curve editor. We want to select that Z. We want to hit fit, and we want to ease it at the end here. That will bring the words slightly closer. Notice we also only are dealing with one value when we turn on horizontal interpolation for our ease. And now, there we go. Now we have, it's easing in, and as we can see, we ease in at the last second. We have a little bit more of our time, and that's what we want to have. So if I hit play, this is going to take a little bit to render. A lot longer to render because we're at 48 minutes. All right, I'm going to be calling this at this point, and you can render this out on your own. I highly recommend you can. All you have to do is tie a right node to the merge over, and let's save this because I want to. I'm going to save this project as I've created a folder called Chiseled. I'm going to call this Chiseled, and I'm going to put underscore 001 and save it so that we can do an incremental save. Wait for our project to end, and I'm going to end the live stream for this one. I'm going to follow this up immediately afterwards for those who have something else to do, and I'll see you in a few minutes. And See you in a while.